Yep. Hi, everybody. This is Donato Cabrera for our first installment of MusicWise. We are so excited to have as our very first guest, my good friend Maria Radutu, all the way from Vienna, Austria. Hi, Maria.
Hi.
There's so much to talk about and subjects to chat with, but just let our audience know, first of all, a little bit about you, where you're from, maybe talk a little bit about what brought you to Vienna and why, and how old you were, and all of those fun things.
Yeah, so I come originally from Romania. I'm a pianist. And I came to Austria when I was 13. I did the exam for the music university. And at that moment, I didn't know if I can. So I got accepted, but I didn't know if I am able to really come. And I had a huge luck to get the only long-time scholarship from the Romanian Academy, which made it possible for me to stay here and to study. And then, yeah, Vienna turned out to got to be my home.
So tell me, was there someone you wanted to study with? Was there a personal connection with who you were studying with in Bucharest, with someone here in where you are now? Why specifically Vienna and not Berlin or London or somewhere else?
I had 4 options because at that time in Romania we didn't have internet or all the stuff that we have now. So it was really, I don't know, looking out for options. And it was Rome, Paris, London, and Vienna. And Italy the program was too easy. So we said, why there? Paris was too far away. And in London, I got accepted per video by the Yehudi Menuhin Academy, which was, I think at that time, £30,000 a year. So impossible for us. So it was Vienna.
Cool. And did you know who you wanted to study with? Or were someone just selected for you?
For the first 2 years, I was in the preparation part of the university. And I was just lucky. I got 3 names and we just choose by, I don't know. I really got lucky to have the best one for talented young pianists. It was Imolayo. And then I got to know the professors here. So 2 years after, when I got to the next grade, I chose to go to Stefan Blatter.
So here's a question, and we've talked about this before. So you come to Vienna, new country. Did you understand any German at all? Did you study German? What was your relationship to the culture and language of Austria when you first came?
When I came, I knew a little bit more, but a long time when I started studying music or learning music, and I was reading about musicians and the composers, and of course about Mozart. For a long time, I thought that the moment you get out in Vienna, you see their cars, they're just horses. And so I had my image of Vienna was very much the 18th century of Mozart.
Right.
And then, so this changed. And of course, the connection that I had was connection. It's not even connection, but I knew 2 CDs by really big pianists. Not talking about the Russian ones, but from the Western parts, and it was Brendel and Polini. So you can imagine how when I saw the name of Brendel on Concerthaus, I was like, oh, I know him.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting when you go to Vienna or New York City or London, and you walk past the Musikverein in Vienna or the Concerthaus or Carnegie Hall, and you see the posters of people that are there every day one day after the next. And you saw, as a young person, Alfred Brendel, who at the time was still playing, obviously, a lot, hadn't retired yet, one of the greatest pianists that, if you are an aficionado of classical music and classical music recordings, he recorded so many there's so many amazing recordings. And of course, Maurizio Pollini, one of the great Italian pianists who was also still is playing, but then was really still at the very top of the piano pyramid. So that must have been so like overwhelming in a good way for you coming to Vienna to be then surrounded in this world that you only had access to via recordings or the TV. Yeah.
And also the recordings were at that time. Now it's not. We cannot even imagine how far away it was. Now you get a flight ticket for 100 euros or something, and now you don't because everything is shut down. But but the distance between Romania and Vienna in the late 90s was a lot bigger. I grew up with the Russian pianists, with the big ones and everything, but this access to information was not as big as it was here already. So, but I had a teacher in Romania, and she studied in Germany. So through her, I had a little bit of access, and also I heard at her place the Schubert Impromptus by Brendel and Chopin by Pollini. So this was the only small door I had, and the rest was from the music history, not from the things that happened at that time. So I discovered all that when I came here.
So you ended up 2 years later studying with another great, very well-known pianist, Stefan Vladar. And do you feel, looking back now, you had a great education in Bucharest, you were learning from a wonderful teacher, then you moved to Vienna. Was it all, like, you look back on your time when you were studying with the pianists, was it all sort of an upward curve, and like the right teacher showed up at the right time in your development? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's quite difficult to answer because I'm really happy that I had a chance to study with him. But I changed a lot teachers when I was young, and then I came to Vienna, and then I found him. I was so happy that I stayed in his class for a very long time, and it was just nobody for me as good as he was. So I studied with him 8 years, and I think in a normal development, or in a general one, it's children are studying along with the first teacher, and then they are changing a lot more. But at the time that I would have been able to change, I was in Vienna for 6 years, and it was the first moment that I felt home, because the first years were not so easy. And I was, from my personal point, I cannot change again. It took me 6 years to be home here. I cannot move to another country for 2 other years. But he was always extremely open to our communication, and so we changed for a while to chamber music. So actually, I learned chamber music also from him. And after this while, then I got back to solo. So he helped me in all these steps of development.
What do you remember some of the things playing chamber music for the first time that was new to you, that you hadn't experienced before, playing just solo repertoire? What that was sort of a shock or a wonderful surprise?
Learning how to breathe together. At the beginning I was 15 when I did the first chamber music rehearsals, and to understand that almost all the others need more time until the sound is here. So it's not like on the piano, it's here. So learning to breathe with them, and this was also the most astonishing part, because at first you learn it, but at some point, if you have an ensemble, this automatically breathing together, it's the most beautiful thing on stage. When you don't have to talk about it, and you don't have to take care of it. it just happens naturally.
And of course, being a pianist, and this is the same with any instrumentalist that does not have to breathe in order to make sound, like someone who plays a string instrument or a percussionist. Of course, being a brass player or singer or a woodwind player, you have to breathe in order to make sound. But I would imagine that going back to playing solo repertoire after learning that you have to breathe in order to make music, it applies also when you play by yourself, more so than maybe you realized. Yeah,
that's exactly the point, that you can produce a sound, you don't have to breathe for it, but in order to make music you have to breathe.
Yeah,
because a lot of music is inspired by singing.
mm-hmm.
So if you don't sing yourself, at least inside, you don't have to hear it, then the phrase won't be natural.
Let's well, actually, before we play the first video, I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of collaboration, of playing with a someone else, even if that person isn't a musician, because you now collaborate with an incredible dancer. He is a dancer, one of the main dancers at the Vienna State Ballet, Enno Pesci. And can you tell us a little bit, before we play this first video, of this incredible collaboration you have, how this idea formed, and what this collaboration means now for you with Enno?
Mm-hmm. We worked together on the stage of the Vienna State Opera for a project where I was invited as a guest soloist. And most of the music was written by Mikael Karlsson, the Swedish composer. Mm-hmm. And we had some scenes, just the two of us. So the whole thing was with videos and dancing and choir and ballet choir and orchestra and a lot of things happening. But from time to time, it was just the male dancer and I, and that was also the ending. Mm-hmm. And it was for me the first time to work with dancers. Mm-hmm. And he was amazing, because everybody tells you with ballet too fast or too slow. You don't get anything else. And if you're good, it's not faster or not slower. And after the premiere, I knew that dancers are getting in the premiere a little bit slower and musicians a little bit faster.
It's so true.
Yeah, because of course, everybody's a little bit nervous. And I asked him, was it fine? And was it too fast or whatever? And he's like, not faster. And after the second time, I asked, and he said, now I know the music so well. You just play and I go with you, because you cannot look at me, but I can listen to you.
Uh-huh.
And that was the wow moment when I realized that he understands where we can help each other. Of course, I had my moments where I was taking care of him and he of me, but mm-hmm. It was this natural communication of how to do it so that every one of us is really free in his art. So based on that, we created the whole program. Mm-hmm. And we always rehearse together. So when he does the choreographies, he's doing the choreographies on my interpretation of the pieces.
So we're going to play this video, and the sound, I will say, we'll see how this works. This is the first time. Tell us a little bit about the first thing we're going to watch, which is called Nini for piano and dance.
That's originally a piece for a world music singer and her band. And I love this piece so much. And the composer wrote me another piece for my next album. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I got on his nerves with Nini. Yeah. So that one day he came with the score and like, that's your Nini. So he rewrote it for piano solo.
And the composer's name is Marco Anau.
Marco Anau, exactly. Yeah. He's an Austrian composer composing a lot of world music. And I was so happy, and Enno also liked it. So yeah, Nini is kind of letting someone go.
Okay, so here it is. I apologize in advance if the sound isn't 1,000%, but it'll be good enough, I'm convinced. I got to put it back to 0. And I'll share the screen. Voila. And here we are. Okay. Beautiful. That was such an amazing piece. So you've now worked for, and so I need to ask, we need to answer one question without giving away your age. How long have you been playing piano?
Long.
I have a question. So we didn't. Yeah. It's always so interesting to me because your mother isn't a musician, right?
No.
So was there a lot of music in the household, or was this something you heard from someone else? Why piano? And when you were a child, what happened?
She was listening to a lot of music, but she was trying with both her children almost everything. So I started with dancing. I did some painting classes, which were really bad. And I was in a preparation group for children.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher, my mother was a sports teacher. She went to her school and she said, I cannot promise anything, but she has a good pitch. She hears good. You should buy a piano. So my mom was shocked, but we were living in these communist buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With a lot of musicians from the national broadcast radio. So everybody gathered up and they found a cheap but good pianino and the best beginners teacher, the best school. So this is how I started with piano. And I think just after 1.5 or 2 years for the first exam, my mother realized that it turned out I was good. So I continued. And then, yeah, the whole Eastern European thing started with competitions and classes and everything.
Did you ever have a desire when you were really young to play another instrument? Like you liked piano, but did you see someone play a violin? Like, oh, I'd love to play violin too.
I desperately wanted to play something else when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not a special thing, but it was something else, because then I realized when I was 10 that we were split up in the pianists and the people that are not good enough for orchestra are going to the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise I'm going to the orchestra. And I said, I don't want to be with, I want to be in the orchestra because they play together. So this was the moment I realized as a pianist, you are a lot of time alone, which I didn't want. But yeah, I had too many competitions already once, so everyone will stay to the piano.
But of course, you actually have, they're not for every piece in the orchestra, or not for every composition written for orchestra, but of course, beginning in the 20th century, especially, the piano is a very important instrument in the symphony orchestra. And you have actually eventually, even as a pianist, and of course playing concertos, you play with an orchestra, which is wonderful. But you eventually had the opportunity to play in an orchestra, play the piano part in an orchestra.
Yeah.
And that must have been fine. That must have been wonderful to have that experience eventually.
It was great because the first time I was playing piano in Celesta on the summer night concert of the Vienna Philharmonic, John Williams' Star Wars.
Amazing.
That was fantastic.
There's another question from Arabella. Do you memorize your pieces, or do you bring your sheet music on the stage with you? This is actually a very good question because I just want to give a backdrop to the idea of memorizing. It was not until Clara Schumann decided to play a concerto by memory. It was her concerto, no? Or was it her husband's piano concerto? Now I can't remember. I think it was her piano concerto. That pianists, including Beethoven, Mozart, you name it, everyone before Clara Schumann played with the music in front of them. And then she decided in the middle part of the early part of the first third of the 19th century to play without music. And actually, she was criticized for this. People thought that it was vanity that she decided to do this. But it's so interesting now because it's almost expected that a soloist walks on stage and usually plays a concerto without the music. So, but that's not always the case. So Maria, maybe you can talk a little bit about your approach, your philosophy about memorizing versus not memorizing.
I used to memorize, and I played everything by heart until I think 3 or 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. The 20th century stuff that we had to do at the university. And when I was young, I was seeing people, the first big pianists playing with the score, like, come on, why? And why they're, because they know it. And at some point I realized that it doesn't matter if you have the score or not. So everybody should do the way they feel best. And when I have, I play with an iPad, mm-hmm. But of course I have to memorize it because you cannot read the music during the concert. So yeah. But the first time I did it, I felt a lot more conscious about time, about the time that I have on stage, and about ritatando. So I felt a lot more free to play with the tempo and to feel also the audience. So I said, why not? If this makes me closer to the audience and closer to what is really happening now, because I'm not afraid that something can happen mm-hmm. with the score, then let's just put an iPad.
That's fantastic. There's another question just came up from Diana Ichikawa. Did Maria help choreograph the dance? I think I see her connection is her connection is breaking up. No, of course not. It's all Eno, the wonderful.
Eno is a fantastic choreographer, and he's doing all the choreography.
Yeah.
But there is a little connection between us because I choose a lot of music that mm-hmm. I thought it's fitting, and then out of the music I choose, he chose the pieces that he's choreographing, and then I put in between. So we build it the program together. Mm-hmm. We have sometimes in rehearsal some moments of connections that are just happening, and then also with Nini at the ending that we're going with the heads down. We didn't choreograph it; it just happened, and we said, oh, "That's exactly the thing. How to end it." So we're getting inspired. Yeah.
I remember, sorry to interrupt, but I was lucky enough, and I think we won't play this video, but because you have it listed, I feel so proud because I took a video of you rehearsing, and you were at the very end. He sits of the piece that you were playing, one of the Chopin preludes. He ends the choreography sitting sort of with you on the piano bench. And you were discussing this final movement, whether or not you should look at him or not, or become a character in the dance rather than just playing piano. And I thought this was a very fascinating moment that I so expertly captured on video.
You were the first person to capture on video anything about piano and dance.
Really?
Yeah.
So many.
Before that.
We don't have to talk about all the other firsts that I've been a part of, but I'm very proud of that. Okay, so now I'd like to play. What are we going to play next? Aha. Okay. This is from. What do we have here? I wanted to play. Yeah. Okay. So next up, we were going to do from again your love for collaboration. You started working with a couple of years ago this fantastic Viennese clarinetist Markus Adenberger, and Markus and you put together this really wonderful recording called and it's especially for an American. I love this play on words. An American who loves American music as well as Vienna. The Gersh Wien project. Wien being the German title name for Vienna. And aside from some wonderful miniatures and so forth, and a great duo of Rhapsody in Blue, you wanted us to hear this recording of the two of you called Hommage Edith Piaf, homage to Edith Piaf. Huh?
That's the piano solo part.
Wait, is that what you want? Wait, okay, what about, do we want to do a duo instead?
As you want. You can.
I want to hear both of you playing.
Then let's do the Penderecki. It's a fun thing to start a CD.
So it's the very first track.
Yeah.
The 3 minutes. Okay, so we'll play maybe the first two tracks. Okay, so let me go to that instead. And okay, we'll go to share screen, etc. Share, and then voila. So had you ever played those pieces before? There's one more movement, which is wonderful as well, but had you ever played or even knew about those pieces by Penderecki?
I knew about them, but I didn't play them before, so it was the first time.
I have a question. You know, maybe you can share with everyone a link to this project, but it's been over a year ago now, but when this refugee crisis especially hit, of course, Southern Europe first, and then as the refugees would start heading north, most of whom thought that Germany would be their eventual location. Of course, everyone was coming, either landing in Spain, Italy, Greece, and then making their way, or or via sort of the around the Mediterranean. But eventually, so many of them would either end up in Austria or come through Austria. And this was not only a political strain, which we in the United States heard a lot about, but it was actually a human condition where so many people who, I'm sure like most of us, we don't want to leave where we live. And when we're forced to go somewhere, it creates such a traumatic event in our lives. I would imagine I've never had to be forced to go anywhere, but you created this amazing project that I'd love for you to talk a little bit about. This is very, it's very appropriate. It's very apropos, very appropriate to now, because so many artists are in a situation where they're now forced to think about how they're going to connect to their audience because they can't leave where they're home. And yet this is very similar in that you felt it was necessary to create a connection, not only with the refugees, but connecting the refugees to Vienna, Austrian life, to European life.
Yeah. Yes, because in Austria, a lot of people really jumped and helped. Not necessarily the NGOs in the first place, but really going to the train station and bringing food and stuff for children. So the civil population was very very welcoming at the beginning, at least. And then there was a point where they were here for a couple of months, and I thought it's good to get all this help at the beginning, but it's important also to give something, to be able to give something back. And that's why we built this project where the unaccompanied young refugees were taking workshops in body percussion and singing and dancing. So it was everything that to do with your body and to put them on stage. So we had concerts that were mixed between local artists and refugees. And a lot of what was important for me, a lot of friendships starting, and they're still going, even if the project is not as it was. But this, I think it was good for them to go on stage, to bring something from their culture, to start talking to each other. And also in the workshops, we had Austrians and not Austrians living in Vienna, and these young refugees. And when you talk to each other and you get to know each other, people are not, Austrian population was afraid of the refugees. The refugees were afraid of the Austrian people. So if you manage to get them to talk, then a lot of beautiful things happen.
And it's I'm curious. This question's about the larger topic of, as an artist, every artist we all have great ideas, right? We all sit at home in the morning, we drink our coffee, it's like, oh, I want to do this project. But it's one thing to be able to sit here with our coffee and our cigarette or whatever, or our third glass of wine and dream big dreams. But it's another thing to actually make the project happen. And can you talk a little bit about, of course, Austria is different from Germany, it's different to France. We all have, and of course, the United States, we all have different, what we call funding mechanisms. How were you able to get the money, enable and support, financial support, to make this project happen for you? Was this individual gifts? Was this applying for government subsidies? How did this work?
I tried to apply for government supplies and state. I didn't get €1. But I got one company to rent a concert hall in the Vienna Concerthaus, and a lot of musicians to play for free. So we did a big launching concert where we got a lot of fundings also for the next months. So this was actually the base for the most of the whole project. So it was just really people seeing what we are doing, and the first friends paying for the first concert hall, and a lot of colleagues of mine saying from the first. I had nobody that said no. Everybody was like, "Yeah, of course I'm part of it." And that
so I guess the lesson is that if you have an idea, don't be afraid to ask your friends to help that idea be a reality.
Yeah, because they can say no if they don't want to.
Of course.
We always ask.
It's very good advice. Let's play another clip. I thought let's talk a little bit about your album Juju. First of all, it's one of my favorite. It's like my favorite title of an album ever. I love the title. And let's talk a little bit how this came to be, because this was your first solo album, yeah?
Yeah. I was very much afraid of microphones.
Why?
So I never, because you play the thing once and then it's there, and then you have to face it how it sounds.
For the rest of your life.
So I never imagined myself recording CDs. And also I never imagined myself talking on stage about the music I'm playing, and that's now exactly what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But I had a concert series in a beautiful concert hall in Vienna, and I got to know Georg Burdicek, who's the most amazing sound engineer.
And he at the time, I guess, well, in the sound engineering world, it's a very small world of people, but he is probably most famous for being the sound engineer for a very well-known Austrian label called Preiser Records. Would you say that's his most famous, or no?
Not only Preiser, he's at least in Austria, I think also in Germany. If a journalist doesn't know the musician and looks on the other side and sees Georg Burdicek, you know it's gonna be good.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
But I didn't know all that stuff, and the concert hall was with this label, mm-hmm. the same hall, and they said, "Come on, let's do a CD, and you have him here." I was like, "I don't want, because you have these micros," and. But he recorded some of the concerts, and we had such a good connection. I said, we can try. And he always, from the first recording, he always made me feel that he's doing nothing and that I have all the time in the world that I want. And he's doing everything.
Amazing.
So I started with him, and I never stopped. And he's definitely the sound engineer I'm doing everything with.
Great. So when did you record Juju? And what track? We're going to listen to the Ligeti track, but which is going to be wonderful. But this was maybe it says
2013.
Aha, yeah, okay.
Yeah. It was when we played in Spain the first time. It was exactly after the first recording.
Wow, 2013. It seems like a lifetime ago. So we're going to listen to a Ligeti piece. Now these etudes are many. I would say for the longest time, most pianists felt that they were impossible to play. And only a few pianists even attempted to learn them and perform them. Tell us about why you chose this challenge for yourself to learn a piece, one of these wonderful pieces by Ligeti, and how did you learn it?
I had to, because it fitted perfectly into my concept. So the concept of the CD is that the middle piece shows 5 composers, mm-hmm. and the first one is Ravel, and the last one is Ligeti. You can see on my homepage why and everything, but that's the short story. And Ravel and Bartók, not Ligeti, but Bartók, and Ravel and Bartók lived at almost the same time, and these 2 pieces are very different. Mm-hmm. So I took this living at the same time, but being very different, and I put it into romantic time, and I played the Chopin, but the very pittoresque Chopin, and a very existential Liszt with Valet Dobermann. And on the other side, after the last piece of the Bartók suite, I thought that Schoenberg fits very well with his 6 little pieces. And the pendant, was Ligeti, this fanfare etude. So I had no other choice but to learn it. And if you realize, you can learn it on the vertical way, because the harmonies are fitting extremely good. And after you memorize it and you learn it, you realize that it's quite jazzy, and it's not as technical as it seems at the beginning. You can really have fun with it.
Okay, well, let's hear it. This is the Etude number 4, the Fanfares Etude by Ligeti. And here's the sharing screen. And voila. It's so funny because it's like your left hand is one half of the brain and your right hand is another half of the brain.
That's the problem with this piece.
It's just, it's like, you know, you're split in half. But it's so interesting because how you just described it before we listened to it, this idea of thinking of it as jazzy, you know, sort of like you're just sort of riffing with the melody in the right hand. It's like fast Thelonious Monk or something. It's fantastic. It's such a great piece. before I think what we're going to do is we're going to play I will share the video of the Mozart Piano Concerto number 23 because it'll be better sound that way. Everyone can watch it on their own. And it's so wonderful. We can talk a little bit about this in a minute, but it's the concerto that the reason why I wanted you as our first guest was because you made your United States debut with the Las Vegas Philharmonic and the California Symphony playing the Mozart's Piano Concerto number 23. And now I have to remember, this was 2006, 17. I was going to say end of 2017. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like, first of all, playing a great concerto, one of the greatest concertos for piano by Mozart, by any composer, and what it's like to, say, visit a new city for the first time, and meeting an orchestra you've never met before. Of course, we knew each other going in, but talk a little bit about that. Your first experiences coming to the United States to play.
Every time it's different because every orchestra it's persons and individuals, and that's very beautiful. And I got so welcomed by both orchestras. And coming to the States, it was the first stop was in Las Vegas, which is different from everything else, Mm-hmm. And the story that I got so late, and then I wanted to go to buy some fruits or something to eat, and the guy from the hotel, you cannot go outside. So it's you move all the time through the hotel. Why? You can go out. So, but then I saw downtown and the concert hall, and and then it was San Francisco, which is for sure the what's the saying? The coldest winter is summer in San Francisco.
The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco, yes. Which may or may not have been credited to Mark Twain. I'm going to believe it was. But anyway.
Okay. So it's 4 years ago. 4 years?
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years ago. It was a beautiful experience, and I was very happy to get to know Sunshine and all the organizers, and both orchestras were wonderful and very, very supportive, and it felt like playing chamber music.
Our principal flute, Christina Cassiano, she just asks, she still, and so many people do, remember your encore, which. And we can talk a little bit about because Fazil Say is such an important, not only composer, but he's an incredible pianist. He just released his complete Beethoven piano sonatas this year. He's sort of a musical force of nature unto himself, and so many people wanted to know what your encore was, because maybe they may not have heard what you said. Can you talk a little bit about this, because it is a very special piece, and we'll try and provide a link to a performance of it somewhere.
It's called Black Earth, and it's one of his most well-known pieces. And I love it so much because it gives the pianist a lot of freedom to play, also in the tempo and with the sounds. I heard a couple of people playing it, and everybody plays it very different. Every single one plays it very, very differently. Mm-hmm. And I like that a lot, and also this kind of a little bit world music and very down to earth. And I recorded it already but it's not published yet, because it's on my next solo album, Phoenix, which is coming in the fall. And which will be exactly the thing that we need after this shutdown. And Fazil Say will be on Phoenix, will be on the album.
But tell the people that maybe didn't see this encore, you have to do something that more than just playing the notes on the keyboard. You actually have to do something else that's not typical.
I have to to press my hand on the chords I'm using. So with the left hand, I go inside the piano.
You press down on the strings.
Yeah. And you can also make a little bit also with the left hand, because when you put your hand on the strings, it sounds like a wood, like a guitar.
Yeah. Guitar. Yeah.
So I press it with the left hand, and then I play with the right hand, and it sounds very mystic.
And it is that. It's very captivating, very atmospheric piece.
You have a lot of echo, and I played it in a church a couple of months ago, and it was the piece, because imagine a Gothic church in Vienna like this, and the sound goes up.
There's a question from a student, a high school student in Las Vegas, from Las Vegas Academy, which is what it's called. Her name's Arabella, and she asks, I currently am a student in the piano program at LVA. I was wondering what I could do with my set of skills as a career option after I graduate from high school. Let me try and answer that question. So I'm assuming that she wants to use her set of skills as a pianist. So obviously, there's so many options when you graduate from high school. First of all, graduating from high school will not give you many career options in any field unless you continue on and going to university. But even if you don't pursue music in university as a major, I think that, and Maria, you can add to this, I think that and it's like, in some ways, it's very similar to learning, to playing sport or dancing when you're growing up. Learning how to be disciplined about something, whether it's practicing an instrument every day or going to football practice every day or whatever, writing every day, drawing every day. The idea of accessing your brain and being disciplined about being creative, because being creative and being disciplined about being creative, they have to go hand in hand. You can be a creative person, but if you don't be disciplined about it and do it with intention, it will never grow. It's like a muscle, the creative muscle. And so even Arabella, if you go off to university and you study something other than music, the skills that you learn practicing your piano every day will help in anything you choose to do. Maria, do you have anything to answer to that? Add?
It's not about a piece of paper with the graduation, but I would always recommend it, because it's about the preparation, not only to get to the graduation, but also to prepare the exam. I don't know how the exam is there, but in Vienna, we had a lot of things to learn. Something that I would never play anymore, but this range of music that you have to learn and try to play convincing, yeah, is very important as a base. And then afterwards you can find your own way, but it's not, so the graduation is not to help your career, but it's for you to help build yourself.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. Thanks, Arabella, for that. I have one more question from actually last week that I wanted to answer, or to talk about. And we can both talk about this, even though it's about conducting per se, but you'll understand, Maria, when I read it. When you plan, and this is from Martha Gardil, when you plan each concert season, what criteria do you use when choosing composers and works for a concert? Maria talked about this a little bit earlier about her recordings. Creating an album, creating a recording is very similar to creating a concert from a conductor's point of view, because you want it to have, it's not just random pieces of, I want to do Beethoven, then I want to do Chopin, then I want to do Ligeti, then I want to do Mozart. It's not about that. You want your album to tell a story beyond just the pieces you choose. And for me, when I program a season of works, it's based on a couple of things. First of all, I don't like to ever program something that any orchestra has done within the last 5 years. That's my rule. It has to be 5 years, and then we can maybe repeat. Even then, I don't usually repeat something that was played 6 or 7 years ago, because there's so many great pieces that orchestras don't ever do that should be done. Or of the famous pieces, there's still so many to choose from without having to repeat every 5 years. That's one criteria. That's not an artistic criteria. It's just sort of a framework that I set in my, it's a rule that I use. But when I program a specific concert, my story, there are different things I can tell. I can tell a story about composers who are all living at the same time. Maybe someone who was living in France, and someone who was living in Italy, and someone who was living in Austria, and they were all composing these pieces within 2 or 3 years of each other. I can use that as a goal. I can choose one composer. So I often like to do these sort of mini festivals where I do all Brahms, but I choose pieces by Brahms that are very different from one another, like the Academic Festival Overture, and then maybe a serenade, and then maybe one of the concertos. They all sound so different, but they're all by the same composer. Or I love to use a very musical thing that maybe most people would never realize, maybe subconsciously do. I use music that are in keys that are related to each other. So maybe I do an overture in A major, and then the concerto is in D major. And then afterwards, the symphony is in G major. So what this does is for those of you who love music, the A major is the dominant chord to the next piece, which is in D major. So that the A major sets you up for the D major piece. And then you have intermission, and then that D major piece is the dominant chord for the G major piece. So you go 5, 5, 5 of 5, 5, 1. And that's a very very specific thing to do. But I tell you, they may not realize what's happening, but it will sound like, this piece should follow the previous piece. How about you, Maria?
I have another one. It's
okay.
Everything right what you said.
Yeah.
I choose but I think this is more for albums. I select pieces by their atmosphere to tell the story. So that leads me to a little invitation for tomorrow to a digital concert for my last album, Insomnia, which is the story of all the night atmospheres that you can have, from impressionistic. You have also Nightmare and the Morning Prayer, and I think the link is somewhere. I don't know. I will.
We'll provide the link.
It's on concertsaal.at. So
Oliver's doing a great job providing links. You may not know that, but he's putting.
Oh, perfect. So for albums, I choose pieces by atmosphere. So sometimes when you see the program, you don't understand why this is related to each other. You get it when you listen to it. And if I don't have a piece for a certain atmosphere, then I talk to a composer to write it.
And tell me about that. How did that? What atmosphere did you want, and who did you choose to write that atmosphere for you?
I wanted something between Nordic minimalism, so on Insomnia, between Peteris Vask's White Scenery, and the last piece where I wanted to have a morning prayer, which is a jazz ballad by an Austrian jazz composer with a fantastic saxophonist. And for in between, I had nothing. So I asked Margareta Ferrer-Petric, who is a very new music composer, but with a lot of heart inside her, and yeah, she's also coming from Balkan, so she was able to understand me what I wanted to say. And she wrote Last Smoke, which is about this moment of the last cigarette of the day or in the morning, where you think you're alone and with your thoughts, but there is something knocking behind, so a ghost is still there. It's like, you cannot hide from me. But the ending is a happy ending. So if you have the link somewhere tomorrow,
we'll put the link. The link is going up. Also, we'll provide a link to Margareta's website so people can hear her music as well. Maria, thank you so much for this. I think for the first time, this went well. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Maria, and you know, it's already 11 p.m. So it's time for getting ready for bed for you. Let's do this again in the future. We can talk. We can find a time to talk about the new album when it's coming out. And thank you again.
I really, really enjoyed it, and thanks for asking. And you have a great day before.
And what I'll do now is, and I'm sure Las Vegas Philharmonic and California Symphony will do the same. We will share your performance of Mozart's Piano Concerto number 23, which is on YouTube. And we can't wait to see you again in real, in the flesh, as they say.
Looking forward to seeing you too very soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Maria.